Well, President Obama seems to be going out of his way to defend Hillary Clinton over the use of her personal emails. Take a listen.
She would never intentionally put America in any kind of jeopardy. And what I also know, because I handle a lot of classified information, is that there's classified and then there's classified. There's stuff that is really top secret, and there's stuff that is being presented to the President or the Secretary of State that you might not want on the transom or going out over the wire, but is basically stuff that you could get in open source.
And joining me now to discuss, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, my home state, and former Republican presidential candidate. Senator, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure.
I first just want to address what we heard President Obama say when he said, there's classification and then there's classification. What do you make of that?
Well, the one thing I didn't hear from him is where his email is kept. I think it's probably kept on a secure server, and I'm very glad it is, because there is a risk to foreign intelligence agencies getting access to emails. So I think it was a judgment call. And I've always been more about not whether it's legal, illegal, top secret of this, is I want a commander-in-chief who has good judgment about the security of the nation. So it does concern me if I'm thinking about who to vote for, and I'm not exactly unbiased, but if I'm thinking about who to vote for, it goes to her judgment, whether it was good judgment to put email that could have been sensitive and or top secret, to put that on a server that's not protected by all the controls that our government has to try to keep out hackers and spies.
And President Obama said, in terms of the FBI investigation, that whatever the outcome of it is, it will not be politically motivated. Do you trust that?
I hope that's right, and I have a great deal of confidence that the FBI does try to be above partisan politics. But, we do have appointees that run them that are political appointees. But I'm very hopeful that that is accurate. I think it is a serious and worrisome thing to have top secret emails just floating around the internet. And I think there's already evidence. There was evidence they brought somebody, a hacker from Europe, that they're talking about whether or not that hacker may have hacked into Clinton emails. I don't know that to be true.
We don't have any reporting on that.
But there's people asking that question.
But the Clinton campaign contends that this is overclassification run amok, and that nothing was marked classified at the time, and that it was classified later. And I've spoken to people in the government who say commonly we email, and people dance around classified topics, some better than others.
I guess to me it is less important the exact detail of classified versus sensitive versus this. It's really the judgment of whether or not the Secretary of State should have had her emails that could have had sensitive information on a private server. So to me it goes to judgment. I want somebody to be in charge of the country who is very careful with our nation's secrets, and it doesn't sound to me like she was very careful.
Does it change your view at all? Because the State Department Inspector General came out and said actually there was some emails on Colin Powell's private email and Condoleezza Rice's that are now marked classified.
No, I think what worries me is that there's a few emails they tell me I can't even look at now, that they're so top secret that I don't have access to these emails. I think there were 12 of Clinton's emails that they've said that I can't look at. So that sounds to me pretty secret, and she was sending them on a private server.
Or receiving them. We don't know if she was sending.
It also troubles me, though, that she fired one of her ambassadors for doing the same thing she did. So she apparently thought it was a serious enough breach to fire one of her ambassadors that was using a private email server. And so that goes to sort of hypocrisy, whether or not what's good for her is good for her employees and vice versa.
So President Obama was also asked about the worst mistake of his presidency. I want to take a listen to that and talk to you after.
Probably failing to plan for the day after what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya.
Do you agree that's his biggest mistake?
I think it was a really big mistake, and I think we should learn from mistakes. And I've asked the president directly about this in a lunch conference. I asked the president, I thought you promised us not to take us to war without the authority of Congress. The Constitution's very explicit. We should have never been involved in Libya without a vote of Congress. Now, I think when we did get to Syria, remember there was an argument about bombing Assad after the chemical weapons attack? I made that same argument, and I think the president did listen somewhat to the people and to those of us who were saying you can't go to war on your own. No president should unilaterally go to war. I hope he learned from it, but I also hope Hillary Clinton learns from it, because Hillary Clinton was in favor of that same policy.
Well, that's what I wonder when you listen to that. Is that soundbite going to end up in a Republican ad? It could be construed that he was indirectly pointing his finger at Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State then.
Well, I hope everybody learns from it, because it wasn't just Democrats. President Obama supported the war in Libya, so did Hillary Clinton, but many leading Republicans were for that war as well. But it's been a disaster. Libya is utter chaos. A third of Libya now pledges allegiance to ISIS. So if you ask yourself, was it a good decision to topple Gaddafi? No, I think it was a terrible decision, but it also happened because President Obama didn't obey the Constitution. The Constitution says that Congress declares war, and he went to war on his own. So if we use the checks and balances of the Constitution, I think we're less likely to make mistakes like Libya.
I want to turn to some reporting from my colleague Manu Raju, who says that your colleagues in the Senate, Republican senators, are not rushing to back Ted Cruz. They are staying on the sidelines, and you're staying on the sidelines too. Why is that?
You know, I think I said my piece. I was involved in a lot of the presidential debates. I got to point out what I thought were my attributes as well as some of the other weaknesses. And, you know, we didn't have enough votes. We valiantly moved forward. But now, you know, I'm running for re-election in Kentucky. So I think my job is more to unify Republicans rather than to continue to point out what I think are some weaknesses of the candidates. And really, I think my message is somewhat unique in the party. I bring a libertarian sort of message, a message for privacy, less military intervention, a conservative military budget that doesn't cause us to go further into debt. So I want to keep promoting those issues as opposed to sort of, you know, being a pundit or a spokesman for any particular candidate.
But not everyone else is running for re-election. Why aren't the other Republican senators rushing to back him?
You know, I think it's some of the same, though, because everybody sort of has a state they represent in the U.S. Senate, and they're trying to promote their agenda.
So you don't think it has to do with them not liking Ted Cruz?
I think that may be overstated. People say that over and over again, that this personal sort of battle. With me, I just figure that what I want the Republican Party to be is a bigger, better, bolder party, more diverse. So I spent a lot of my time over the last 2 years speaking to African American audiences saying, this is our message and we want you in our party. Hispanic audiences saying, this is our message, we want you in our party. And I think that's a useful thing, but it isn't so useful if I'm just a surrogate for one candidate or another. I'll support the nominee. I've said who wins the Republican nomination, I will support them.
Okay, so hypothetically, if Donald Trump is the nominee, how do you think he would do against Hillary Clinton?
You know, I think on some issues,
she's the nominee, obviously.
I think on some issues, like on the trade issues, he mixes it up. And so states like Ohio, Wisconsin, maybe even New York, where there's a certain part of the population that has misgivings about job loss with regard to trade, Trump has a chance that some other Republicans might not have. But I think his rhetoric, his inflammatory rhetoric that I think sometimes incites hatred, I think isn't good for the party. So I've said before that we can have a variety of opinions on how to fix immigration, and I am for more security at the border, but I think we should not vilify those who want to immigrate to our country, because part of the reason they want to come here is it's such a great place. They come here seeking freedom. They come here seeking opportunity. They need to come lawfully, but I think it's a mistake to somehow sort of say, oh, it's a bunch of drug dealers and rapists that have come here. Most people come here, I would say the overwhelming majority are coming here looking for freedom and prosperity.
So with Donald Trump, his latest complaint, if you will, is that the delegate system is rigged and crooked. Do you think he has a point?
You know, I've been involved since I was a kid. I was actually at the last contested convention in 1976. I was 13, and my dad was a Reagan delegate. And it wasn't decided, and Ford wins on the first ballot by about 100 delegates. Interestingly, even back then, Pennsylvania was undecided. This year, they'll be undecided. So in 1976, Pennsylvania sent unobligated delegates. They're doing it again, and people had to jockey back and forth. We have these rules in presidential elections as well. You vote, states vote, and then electors vote. And interestingly, electors haven't always voted for the candidate they were supposed to. In 1972, a Nixon elector actually voted for the Libertarian candidate, John Hospers. So we have all these rules, but you have to be involved with it, and you have to have the enthusiasm of the party, and Trump needs to do a better job, because I think he's losing overwhelmingly in the delegate count.
Because that is a possible scenario we could see if there's a contested convention with these so-called double agent delegates, where they vote for Trump on the first ballot and the second ballot go for Cruz. What do you think about that, if that does play out?
You know, you have to be active in the party. Trump has brought new people into the party, and that's good. New people that are enthused about his candidacy. but they also have to participate. You got to show up at the precinct convention and the county convention, the state convention. It's always been that way. Those are the rules, and enthusiasm goes a long way. You know, in 2012, when my dad was running, he got that enthusiasm. He actually did better in the delegate count than he did in the actual popular count. But that's the way the system works, and the rules are the same for everybody.
Just really quickly, I know you're running for re-election in Kentucky. You dropped out of the presidential race shortly after the Iowa caucuses. Do you ever have any regret that perhaps you dropped out too early?
No, not really. I mean, we got 5% of the vote. We beat Jeb Bush. I beat Kasich. I beat Fiorina. I beat half of the field. But the problem is that they had hundreds of millions of dollars to spend in New Hampshire, and that money, I think, was overwhelming our message. Plus, I think the Trump phenomenon, the microphone that he was granted for one reason or another, it was 25 times bigger than the entire Republican field together. And that overwhelming news cycle that was dominated by Trump dominated all others, other than, you know, maybe the one remaining Cruz now. So it's interesting to see how it shakes out, but no real regrets. I feel honored to be in the U.S. Senate. I feel honored to have been part of the debate.
All right, Senator Rand Paul, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
And still